Hello and welcome back to the Complete Design Thinking course. In our previous session, we explained and understood, in fact, why design thinking actually matters. We learned that many products, services, and even billion-dollar projects fail, not because people lack intelligence, but because they start with solutions instead of understanding the real problem. In this particular session, we begin the first stage of design thinking process, right? In fact, if you may recall, we had those five, steps or stages. We started with empathize, then we understood what define was, okay, and then ideate, and then prototype, and then test. So in this particular session, we will understand in a much deeper level, that is empathize. And if this one stage that actually determines the success of everything that follows, right, it is actually empathize, because we are going to start with that. And hence the title of today's session is Understand Before You Design. Okay, so please understand. Those four words capture the entire philosophy of design thinking. So most people think design thinking starts with ideas. Design thinking says otherwise. It says, before you create an idea, before you sketch, before you brainstorm, before you write a single line of code, in fact, understand the person you're designing for. Because if you misunderstand the user, even the best solution can solve, the wrong problem. That's really understand. So now look at the sentence on this particular slide. It says, go to where the user is, observe, interview, experience, then and only then design. So notice the order. First, it says go to where the user is. So don't call them into a conference room. Don't rely only on reports or spreadsheets. If you're designing for students, visit the classroom. If you're designing for patients, observe the hospital. Go and talk to patients. I mean, seek permission, of course. If you're designing for farmers, go to the farm. So, real understanding comes from seeing people in their natural environment. The second one is observe. So, don't just ask questions. What people actually do, because people often behave differently from what they say. Someone may say, I always eat healthy. But when you observe them during a busy day, you may find them skipping meals or eating fast food. So behavior often tells us more than words. The third one is interview. Have conversations. Ask open ended questions. Don't ask leading questions, which will lead to an answer of yes or no or something like that. Okay. Listen more than you speak. Don't try to convince. Don't try to solve. You only your only objective is to understand. And finally, experience. Whenever possible, put yourself in the user's situation. If you're designing for wheelchair users, try navigating a building in a wheelchair. If you're improving a public transport system, travel the same route during rush hour. Experience creates a level of understanding that observation alone cannot. So, only after doing these four things, design. That's why this stage is called empathize. Not because we need sympathy, not because we need to feel sorry for people, not, but because we need to understand their world from their perspective. Now, let's look at where today's session fits into the overall course. This is session number 1, S1 of our design thinking journey. And in S0, we understood why design thinking matters, right? So in the coming sessions, of course, we'll start with then, define, ideate, prototype, test, iterate, present, and we will wrap up. Okay. So think of today's session as laying the foundation. Now, if this foundation is weak, every stage that follows becomes weaker. Now, notice something else on the slide, the duration. Okay, I'm saying this is for 90 minutes. I will try to wrap up a little early because maybe If I get an opportunity to interact everybody live, obviously conversations and all will take some time and, or extra time, and therefore the session will lead to 90 minutes, right? But this is very important also because you will take some time. You will spend time observing, interviewing, thinking, reflecting, analyzing. And that's exactly how good designers work. You remember our first example, okay, where the IDEO team actually took 5 days, in fact, okay. First day, second day, they in fact spent a lot of time in understanding the user, okay. So that's what it is, right? So let's move on to the next one. Correct. So, in the previous slide, we learned that design thinking begins with understanding people before designing solutions. But that raises an important question. How is empathy different from research? After all, both involve users, both involve collecting information, and both help us make better decisions. So, are they the same? The answer is no. Research and empathy answer two completely different questions. Let's understand this using the three examples shown on the slide. Example one is about market research. Imagine you're running an e commerce website, and after analyzing your data, you discover something interesting. 27% of users abandon the checkout page before completing their purchase. And this usually happens. Just think for that moment when you actually did. That's valuable information. It tells you what happened. 27% of users left. But think of a moment. Does that number tell you why they left? No, it doesn't. Okay, so the number doesn't tell us whether users were confused. It doesn't tell us whether they didn't trust the payment gateway. It doesn't tell us whether they were distracted by a phone call or whether they simply changed their mind. Data tells us what happened. Okay, but it cannot tell us what people were thinking or feeling when it happened. That's why market research is useful, but it's incomplete. It's not, in fact, the primary research. It's the secondary research. Okay, it gives us the destination, not the journey. Let's take the second example, which is about surface interviews. Now, suppose we decide to interview users. We ask, what would you like us to improve? Many users reply, I want a fast checkout. Now we have moved beyond numbers. We are talking to real people. That's definitely an improvement. But we are still only scratching the surface. Why? Because users often describe symptoms, not root causes. Let us think about that statement. I want a faster checkout. What does faster actually mean? Does it mean fewer screens? Does it mean fewer clicks? Does it mean quicker loading? Or does it actually mean something else entirely? Sometimes people say faster when they really mean is something like I don't feel confident while making online payments, or I'm worried I'll make a mistake. So their words describe the symptom, not the cause. And that's why interviews are useful. But they still require deeper exploration. Look at example number three, which is deep empathy observation. Okay. Instead of asking users, imagine we quietly observe them using the checkout page. One user reaches the payment screen. They stop, they hesitate, they read every instruction twice. Their hands shake slightly while entering their card details. They look around before typing the PIN. Suddenly, we discover something that neither data nor interviews revealed. The problem isn't speed. The real problem is anxiety. They're afraid of making a mistake. They're worried someone might be watching, or something might go wrong. They're nervous about entering financial information. Now think about the solution. If we believed the problem was speed, we would try to make the checkout page faster. But if we understand the real problem is anxiety, or solution changes completely, we might simplify the interface, use reassuring messages, reduce distractions, provide clearer feedback. the solution, automatically changes because our understanding changed. And this is exactly what empathy helps us discover, right? Again, I'm taking you back to the IDEO shopping cart story, right? The the design team could have conducted a survey asking shoppers, what would you like in a shopping cart? And most people would probably have said, make it lighter, make it bigger, give me more space. Instead, what they observed, they went, in fact, to the supermarkets. They observed families, they watched parents struggling with children, they observed store employees collecting cards. Then they noticed behaviors people themselves never mentioned. And because they observed rather than assumed, they discovered that child safety and hygiene were far more important than appearance. Those insights, so insights are always hidden, okay? They are never obvious. Could never have, come from a questionnaire alone. They came from watching real people in real situations, okay? So the the teaching manual, which is already there, right, and introduces you another very important idea. Not all empathy is equally deep. There are three levels of empathy. Level one, which talks about surface, and you ask users, what do you want? And they tell you the whole story. You write it down. And this gives you some stated preferences. But stated preferences often become, features people never use, right? Level two is like observed. Okay. Now you stop asking, you actually start watching, you observe what people actually do. Sometimes what people do is very different from what they say. So behavior is often more reliable than words. And then the level three is felt. Okay. And this is where design thinking aims to actually reach. Here you understand the emotions behind the behavior, the fear, the frustration, the hope, the anxiety, the excitement, because emotions drive behavior. And when you understand emotions, you create, products that people genuinely, love. Not just products, they that they actually use. And this is the highest level of empathy and the goal of this entire session, in fact. Okay. So, what is the key takeaway? The key takeaway is, if so it's very simple. Research tells you what happened, empathy tells you why it happened. Research gives you information, empathy gives you understanding. And great innovation always begins with understanding. So now we know that empathy is much deeper than research. Here is the next challenge. How do we actually uncover what people truly need, right? Can we simply ask, what do you want? Usually, no, right? Because people often don't know what they really need, or they describe, and yeah, this is true actually, or they describe the problem only at the surface level. And that's why design thinking uses one of the simplest and most powerful techniques called the 5 whys. Okay. Although this technique was in fact originally developed by uh, Sakichi Toyoda at Toyota for root cause analysis. Design thinking uses it to uncover the deeper emotional and human reasons behind people's behavior. Now, notice something really important. The 5 whys is not about asking exactly 5 questions. It doesn't mean you must say why 5 times, okay? Not literally. Instead, it's a mindset. It reminds us never to accept the first answer as the final answer. One goal is to keep exploring until we reach the real human problem. So let us understand this using the example shown on the slide. A real example, okay? Suppose someone says, I miss my bus every morning. Okay, so most of us immediately start thinking of solutions. Maybe we should improve the bus schedule. Maybe we need another bus, maybe we need a reminder app. But design thinking says, don't solve yet, instead be curious. So we ask, why do you miss the bus? And the people reply, the person replies, in fact, uh, because it leaves too early. That's the answer number one. Okay, what you just got. So many people stop here, right? But we are not done. We should ask again. Okay, why is leaving early a problem? So the answer is because I have to drop my children at school first. Now our understanding has changed, but let's continue. Why can't someone else drop them? The answer is my partner works night shifts. Interesting, right? So let's keep going. Why haven't you arranged something with the school? The answer becomes, I'm worried about what they will think. Now we are getting somewhere. Okay. One final question. Why does that worry you? The answer is, I'm afraid they'll think I'm a bad parent. Now compare the first answer with the final answer. We started with, I miss my bus, but we ended with, I'm afraid people will judge me as a bad parent. And those two are, completely different problems. If we had stopped after the first answer, we might have designed a bus tracking app. But after reaching the fifth answer, we realized the real challenge has nothing to do with transportation. It's about fear of judgment. And that's the power of the 5 why. It helps us move from symptoms to root causes, from facts to feelings, from surface problems to human needs. The rules of a great empathy interview, hence, is they may seem simple, but they make a huge difference. Rule number one is ask often open questions. That's first. So instead of asking, do you like this app? Ask, tell me about the last time you used it. Why? Because closed questions usually produce the one word answers. Open questions produce stories, and stories contain emotions, struggles, and insights. Rule number two is ask why after every important answer. Don't rush, don't just be curious. Sometimes one simple why opens the door to an entirely different conversation. Rule number three is let silence work. This is one of the hardest skills for beginners. After asking a question, don't rush to fill the silence. Wait. People often, need a few seconds to, in fact, think. Many of the most meaningful answers come after the silence. And rule number four is sit beside the person. Whenever possible, sit beside your, participant instead of directly across a table. Why? Because sitting across a table can feel like an interview or an interrogation. Sitting side by side feels more like a conversation. People usually become more relaxed and open. Rule number five is record their exact words. Don't hesitate. Okay? That's one. Don't translate, don't summarize, don't improve their sentences. Write exactly what they say. Their words reveal how they see the world. Later, those exact quotes become one of the most valuable parts of your empathy map. Rule number six is ask your feelings. Ask about the feelings. So don't stop with facts. Or also ask something like, how do you feel when that happened? So design thinking isn't interested just in actions. Okay, it's interested in emotions, because emotions drive behavior and behavior shapes design. So, one mistake beginners usually make is, right, they often try to solve the problem during the interview when people first learn design thinking, and that's a mistake. An empathy interview is not a consulting session. It's not a sales conversation. It's not a not brainstorming. It's so your job is to actually understand. Don't give advice. Don't suggest solutions. Don't interrupt. You listen, observe, ask more why, one more why, in fact, and that's enough. Okay, so the key takeaway is the first answer is rarely the real answer. Keep asking, keep listening, keep observing, and eventually you will uncover the real human need hidden underneath the surface problem. And that's where meaningful innovation begins. Now that you understand how empathy interviews work, let's make the preparation easier. And this is where AI becomes a powerful thinking partner. Notice, I don't say replacement, I said thinking partner. So AI cannot observe people. AI cannot notice a long pause. AI cannot see people hesitate before answering. And AI certainly cannot experience another person's emotions. Only you can do that. But AI can help you prepare much better questions before you meet your users. And that's exactly what we are going to do. On this particular slide, you will see a prompt. In fact, you're seeing that right now. Uh, you can copy into any of the AI chat tools that you have, maybe ChatGPT, Gemini, or perhaps any other AI tool, right? So your step one here is describe your design challenge. Okay, start by telling the AI what problem you're trying to solve. For example, you can start, and you can follow a prompt, style, right? That's always good. You can define the role, you can define the context, okay, and of course the action that you want. Okay, so the first the example here could be like, I'm trying to help first year college students adjust to campus life, and this is a kind of outcome that you really want to achieve. Or maybe you can rephrase that saying, I'm trying to improve the experience of patients waiting in a hospital. These are two different outcomes for two different contexts. The clearer your challenges, the better the AI can help you. Now you have to describe your user. Be very specific. Don't simply write students. Instead, write something like first year engineering students living away from home for the first time. Now this is much better, and it has enough information compared to simply saying students, because you don't have to generalize. Or let me give you another example: working mothers who commute more than 2 hours every day, right? So not for every working woman, mothers, or for mothers per se. So remember, design thinking always focuses on one specific person with one specific, problem in one specific situation. Okay, the more specific your user, the better your interview questions become. And you can have many such users, right? You can create the whole lot of user stories, combine them, create a whole persona, and then continue. So the question is, what should AI generate? Okay, very simple. So look at the instruction, each instruction, 5 open questions. Ask the AI to generate 5 open-ended, questions. Notice the wording on the slide, not ordinary, questions. Questions that go beyond the surface problem. Instead of asking, do you like online classes? You should always ask, tell me about the last time you attended an online class. What was that experience like? So one question encourages a yes or no answer. The other encourages a story, and stories are where empathy, begins. One follow-up why for every question. So good interviews don't stop after the first answer. We already understood that. They go deeper. Ask the AI to suggest a follow-up why question for every, question. For example, if the user says, I avoid asking questions in class, the follow-up might be, why do you avoid asking questions? Okay. Sometimes that one follow up question reveals the real problem. The third one is one emotional question which you can use, and that's my favorite part. I'll say, ask the AI to generate a question that uncovers emotions. For instance, how do you feel at that moment, or what was going through your mind when that happened? Because people remember experiences than emotions, not through facts, of course. Okay. So one workaround question could be, and this is what many beginners actually forget. So people often solve problems in their own creative, ways. These are called workarounds, basically. So maybe a student keeps handwritten notes because they don't trust digital reminders. Maybe a patient takes photos of medicine labels instead of remembering the names. Maybe a commuter leaves home 30 minutes early just to avoid uncertainty. These workarounds tell us where existing solutions are failing, right? And that's why we ask about them. Okay. Two questions you should actually avoid, and this is just as important. Ask the AI to identify closed questions that you should never ask, right? Questions like, do you like this? Would you use this? These questions limit conversation. Instead of discovering new insights, they encourage short answers, and short answers really lead to innovation. So one important reminder here is using AI does not mean your research is finished. Yes. These are only interview questions. The real learning begins when you meet users, observe them, listen carefully, follow unexpected conversations, and don't be afraid to ask, tell me more. Because no AI can replace a real human conversation. Okay. So the key takeaway is use AI actually, right? And there are so many things that you can actually do. Right. Now it's time to move from learning to actually doing, because design thinking cannot be learned by watching videos alone, right? So you'll have to actually do that. And it has to be practiced in this activity. You're going to conduct your very first empathy interview. Okay, we call it as life partner interview, what you say. Uh, if you're attending this as part of a classroom or workshop, uh, my suggestion would always be, or if there are facilitators around to help you, you pair up with the person next to you. And if you're learning online, of course, right, ask a friend, colleague, family member, or classmate to spend about 15 to 20 minutes with you. Remember, you're not interviewing just alone, okay, or just anybody. That's one. You're interviewing someone who represents the user for a design challenge. In fact, for your design challenge. And now let's understand how this actually works. So, phase A is where person A interviews person B. One person becomes the interviewer, the other person, the participant. You will spend about, let's say, 10 minutes interviewing your partner, and then you will switch modes. Okay. Now, notice the first instruction on the slide. Use your AI generated questions, but follow the human, not the script. And this is very important. The questions you generated using AI are only a starting point. Don't become dependent on those questions. If your participant says something unexpected, explore it. If they mention a challenge you never considered, ask about the challenge. Some of the best insights come from conversations you never planned to have. So remember, you're interviewing a person and not reading a questionnaire. Okay. And those questions that AI has generated for you are not the only Bible. Okay. So use why and tell me more. The second instruction is one of the most powerful habits, in design thinking. That is what I will tell you. And so always ask why, or can you tell me more about that? Okay. These simple follow-up questions encourage people to think more deeply very often. And the second answer is better, of course, than the first. The third answer is better than the second. And sometimes the real insight appears only after the fourth or fifth question. So be patient, be curious. Okay. Now, let's look at the next instruction. Write their exact words, not your interpretation. That's one. So this may seem like a small detail, but it's incredibly important. Suppose your participant says, every Monday morning, I feel nervous before entering the office. Okay. Don't write. The user is stressed. Those are your words instead. Okay. Write exactly what they've said. Every Monday morning, I feel nervous before entering the office. Later, those exact quotes will become the foundation of your empathy map. And they often reveal emotions that summarize, complete that completely miss. Okay. Um, Empathy isn't only about listening, it's also about observing. Notice the instruction on the slide. Watch body language. Okay. Does the person smile while telling the story? Do they hesitate before answering? Do they look away when discussing a particular topic? Do they become excited when describing a possible experience? Or sometimes, right? So when people don't say, it's just as important as what they say. So body language gives us clues about emotions that words alone cannot express. Let's look at phase B, and this is where we are going to switch roles, right? And you switch role after 10 minutes. Now person B becomes the interviewer here, person A becomes the participant. Follow exactly the same process. Open questions, follow up, why questions, exact quotes, careful observation. Everyone should experience both roles, because interviewing teaches empathy, but being interviewed teaches vulnerability. So don't say that, okay, I am the interviewer, I am the designer, so I should only ask questions. No, you should also be questioned, because then only you'll feel the pain. So both experiences are valuable. So before ending the interview, one final question. What emotion comes up when you think about the problem? This question often changes the entire conversation. Instead of discussing facts, people begin talking about fear, frustration, hope, confidence, embarrassment, or excitement. Those emotions are exactly what design thinking is trying to understand. And at the end of the interview, don't immediately jump to solutions. Instead, write down the three most surprising things your partner said. And remember, write them in their exact words. Sometimes you may not be able to capture exact, but you should definitely have that ability to listen uh, very carefully and try to write exactly. But you can also paraphrase it. It's okay. Okay. Uh, so you don't have to, of course, write the summary or interpretation. That's what I try to mean. Um, those three quotes will become the raw material for the next tool, which is going to be the empathy map. Okay. So before you begin, let me quickly mention a few common mistakes. Don't interrupt, don't suggest solutions, don't try to impress the participant. Don't ask leading questions so you were frustrated, right? Because the answer will be yes, I was, or I was not. This is not what we want. Instead, ask, how did that make you feel? Let the words come from them. Okay. So let them choose the words. Your role is not to guide the answer, your role is to discover it. So the word discover here is very important. So the key takeaway from this entire conversation is a summary that you have to create from this entire thing, right? It's very important that uh, the empathy interview, to be very successful, isn't measured by the number of questions you asked. It's actually measured by how deeply you understood another person's experience. Okay, that's the real objective. So congratulations, I will say. You've just completed your first empathy interview. Now you probably have pages of notes, quotes, observations, whatever you may call, emotions, ideas. But here's the challenge: how do we organize all this information, right? So that it actually helps us design better solutions. And that's exactly why the empathy map was created. So let me give you the background. Empathy map was developed by Dave Gray of Explain. You can Google him. And has become one of the most widely used tools in design thinking, right? Its purpose is very simple: to help us organize everything we learned about one specific user. Notice I said one specific user, not all users, not an average customer, not a group, not so one real person. Because design thinking doesn't begin by designing for everyone. It actually begins by deeply understanding one person with a specific problem. Now, let's go through each section of empathy map. Now, but before that, I think some of you may feel when it is one specific person, but you may be either entitled to create a product uh, for a for a large group of people, something like that, and very obvious it is. So you may feel that how can that one person represent anxiety, pain, or everything for everybody else? You're fair enough to ask that question. And that's where you don't have to. So the answer is don't just rely on one person. Okay. You may have to discuss it with maybe 500 people. Trust me. Right. If you're working for a large organization or you're building a great company or a great product, you may have to spend months sometimes in doing that. Okay. Create a lot of user stories. That's the crux that I'm trying to help you build. Okay, so let's start with the center of the map. What is the user thinking and feeling? Right, this is the user's inner world, their worries, their hopes, their fears, their dreams. Sometimes people tell us these things differently, but often they don't. You may need to infer them from pauses, from body language, tone of voice, or the gap between what they say and what they actually do. For example, a student says everything is fine, but they hesitate before answering. They avoid eye contact. They become emotional when talking about exams. You might infer that they are feeling anxious or overwhelmed. Notice something really important. Okay, this section is based on evidence and not imagination. Never intend emotions. Okay, this is very important. Okay, because when you start inventing those emotions, uh, uh, you're taking some assumptions and you will be at risk. So only record emotions that your observations genuinely support. Okay, so the next part, which is on the box that you see, sees, right? Here the question is, what does the user see every day? Think about their environment, what surrounds them, what products do they already use, what challenges exist around them, who influences them. For example, if your user is a college student, they may see crowded classrooms, constant assignment deadlines, social media comparisons, and classmates who appear confident. Right, all of these influence how they think and behave. So context matters because people don't make decisions in isolation. They make decisions within an environment. The third one that you see is says and does. Okay, so this section is one of the most important. Here you record exact quotes from your interview, not summaries or interpretations. If your participant says, I always feel rushed in the morning, you write exactly that. You can put it in quotes, that's fine. Okay, so don't rewrite it as like the user has poor time management. That's a wrong way of interpreting. It's always better whatever they said. Right, please mention. At least try to write as close as what they said. Okay, so those are your words, right? Not theirs. Also, in fact, one of the best things I'll say just clicked to my mind is you can record it always, because you'll always have a transcript and you can use that. So you'll not you don't have to paraphrase. Perfect. Also include behaviors you actually observed. Maybe they checked their phone repeatedly. Maybe they smiled while discussing one topic. Maybe they avoided answering another. So remember, behavior is often more reliable than memory. What people do is sometimes very different from what they say. Okay, so the first row is complete. Now we are at the fourth, you can say, point, the second row, the bottom row, and that's how we start with hears. Okay, so think about the voices influencing your user. What are they hearing from family, friends, teachers, managers, social media, news, society, for example? right? So a young entrepreneur may constantly hear something like, get a stable job first. A student may hear, mm, marks are everything. Okay, a patient may hear, just ignore it, it'll be fine. Now these messages shape people's decisions, even if they don't always agree with them. Understanding these influences helps us understand the user's world. The fifth one is pains. What pains them? So now let's identify the user's biggest frustration and what makes their life difficult, what obstacles keep appearing, what are they afraid of, what prevents them from achieving their goal. Notice, pains are more than inconveniences. Sometimes the biggest pain is emotional. It's fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of wasting money, fear of asking for help. These emotional barriers often become more important than technical ones. And the last one here is gains. What user, uh, uh, I mean, yeah, so your user gains. Right. So here, finally, what does success look like for the user? What are they trying to achieve? What would make them say, yes, this solved my problem? This kind of sentence. Don't define success from your perspective, define them from their perspective. For one user, success may mean saving time. For another, it may mean feeling confident. For someone else, it may simply mean reducing stress. Different users measure success differently, and that's why empathy comes first. Okay. There's one mistake I see again and again. People fill the empathy map with their own opinions instead of writing what they observed. They write what they believe. That's not empathy. Maybe for learning purposes, for the first day, you may do the homework through your thoughts. But I would not advise, I would always advise that to keep a friend around and, do those interviews, capture the observations in real scenario. Okay, because if you don't do that, that's not empathy, that's not at all assumption. Okay, that's an assumption, in fact. So remember these simple rules. You use exact quotes wherever possible, separate observations from interpretations, and always build one empathy map for one specific person, not for the entire group. So the key takeaway is an empathy map helps us organize observations, separate facts from assumptions, and understand the user's world before we begin solving their problem. Because when we truly understand people, better ideas naturally follow. Okay, and here is the template that you actually see. Most valuable activity which you have to do in this design thinking process. You have completed your empathy interview, your observations, exact codes, behaviors. Now it's time to make sense of everything you have learned. And this process is called synthesis. Okay. Think of it like putting together the pieces of a puzzle. Each observation, quote, emotion, all these are clues. When you connect those clues together, a much deeper understanding of your user begins to emerge. That's exactly what an empathy map helps us do. Okay. So, step number one, start with your interview notes, right? Before you begin, filling the map, go back to your interview notes, read them carefully, don't rush, read each quote, again. Look at every observation you recorded. Very often you will notice something during your second reading that you completely missed during the interview. And that's perfectly normal, right? Design thinking rewards careful observation. Your step number two is use their exact words. Notice the instruction on the slide. Fill the map using their exact words wherever possible. This is extremely powerful, extremely important. Suppose your participant said, I always feel like I'm running behind everyone else. Don't rewrite it as the user lacks confidence. I already told you. Okay, those are your words. Instead, you record the exact sentence. I always feel like I'm running behind everyone else. Why? Because their words reveal how they see the world, and that's exactly what they're trying to understand. Step number three is complete every section. Let's quickly walk through, each section again. Thinks and feels, sees, says and does, hears, paints, gains. One user, one map. And here's very common mistake. Every, in fact, many teams interview 3 or 4 people, right? And immediately combine everyone's answers into one empathy map. Don't do that. One empathy map represents one person. So if different users have different experiences, create separate maps. Otherwise, you'll lose the unique insights that make design thinking so powerful. And today you can use the AI. Let's say you have collected 100 such. You can give it to AI tool and tell them, extract the insights, and it'll come up with in a very powerful manner. Just try that out. So look for surprises, of course. Once you've completed the map, pause for a moment, read it again, ask yourself what surprised me, not what did I already know. So real insights are usually surprising. If everything on your map simply confirms, what you believed before the interview, you probably haven't gone deep enough. So go back, interview again, observe more carefully. The best designers are always, willing to learn one more thing. Okay. So the key takeaway is very simple. Don't fill the empathy map with opinions. Fit it with evidence. The stronger your evidence, the stronger your understanding, and the stronger your understanding, the better your design decisions will be. 2 more slides left. Right. So we are on slide number 8, and then 9th and 10th. Okay, fine. So you have now completed your interview. You've filled the empathy map. You have quotes, observations, everything, pains. Now comes one of the most exciting parts of design thinking process is finding patterns, because collecting information is only the beginning. The real value comes from understanding what all those observations really mean. And this is where AI becomes an incredibly powerful thinking partner. I told you. Notice, I didn't say decision maker, designer, or thinking partner. Okay. AI cannot replace your observations. It cannot replace your empathy. But it can help you connect ideas that you may have missed. Okay. So let's walk through it together. Step number 1 is tell AI who your user is. Start by describing the person you interviewed. Be specific. Instead of saying a student, you write a first year engineering student living away from home for the first time. Right. Step number 2 is paste their exact codes. Okay. Don't rewrite them. Okay. That's one. Describe. That step number 3 is describe what you observed. Uh, right. So tell AI what you noticed during the interview. Like, did the person hesitate, or did the person smile when discussing the topic? All that. Okay. Then include their pains and gains. Now share the biggest frustrations you identified. Also describe what success looks like from the user's perspective. Okay. Because this will give AI the complete picture. Right. Now let's look at what AI should generate. The first request is perhaps the most important. 3 insight statements. Notice the wording, not observations, insights. Right. The second one is the underlying user need. Ask AI to identify the deeper human need. Sometimes users ask for speed, but what they really need is confidence. Okay. Then third one is one assumption that was challenged. And this is one of my favorite questions. Okay. Before every interview, we all have assumptions. Maybe you assumed students struggle because they don't manage time well. But after the interview, you discover they're actually afraid of asking questions in class. So the fourth one is what do you still not know, right? And this is incredibly valuable because good designers don't stop after one interview. They identify gaps. Okay, because design thinking is an iterative process. Understanding will actually grow with every conversation. And one important reminder, AI is excellent in finding patterns, but it only knows when you give it. If your interview was shallow, AI's analysis will also be shallow. If your observations are rich, AI can help you discover remarkable insights. So, the key takeaway for this slide is you collect the evidence, AI connects the patterns, and you make the design decisions. Congratulations, you have just completed the empathize stage of design thinking, and this is the first stage of design thinking process. And it's arguably the most important one because every great solution begins with deeper understanding of people. Before we move to the next session, let's quickly review the 5 most important lessons that we learned today. Okay. The first lesson is empathy is not sympathy and it's not research. Okay. The second lesson is the real problem is rarely the first problem. People usually describe symptoms, not root causes. So when somebody says, I need a faster checkout, that may not be the real problem. Maybe they're anxious. Maybe they don't trust the system. And that's why we learned the 5 whys technique. Lesson number 3 is the empathy map that organizes human understanding. We just finished that. Lesson number 4 is great insight should surprise you, right? Okay, so for example, students struggle with exams. That's an observation. Everyone should already knows that. But students don't fear exams. They fear disappointing their families. This is an actually insight. Okay. And lesson number 5 is AI synthesizes, humans empathize. Today's final lesson is all about is right AI, and AI is an amazing assistant. It can organize your roles, find patterns, suggest insights, challenge assumptions, but AI cannot replace empathy. It cannot observe a hesitant smile. So your achievement for the day is you now have a completed empathy interview, empathy map, insight statements, a much deeper understanding of your user. Coming up next will be the second stage that is define. Right. And this is where we will try to define the right problem. Thank you for watching.